Hello and welcome to the eRace Classic. It's our second Zwift race with Team INEOS, and we are taking on the rolling hills of Yorkshire with the Tour of To It Well. The route is one of 6 rolled out with Zwift's UCI 2019 Worlds Map and is a punishing 6.5-mile twisting and turning circuit. The riders will take on 4 laps of the course. And while it's a scratch race with the first across the line winning overall, we put in a King of the Mountains competition to spice it up a bit, with points being scored at the KOM banner on each lap. 6 teams will be racing again, each with their own DS. Now, it was Rowan Dennis who took an impressive win in the first e-race up the Alpe du Zwift, and he certainly took bragging rights within his new team. But he will have a strong competition today because the course looks set to suit the classics riders. And with Strade Bianche and Milan San Remo kicking off the new revised UCI calendar, a clear favourite today has to be a rider who's won both of those illustrious races, Mikael Kwiatkowski. So I caught up with Mikael a few days ago. First of all, where are you in the world and how are you finding lockdown? You look like you're in a garage, is that right?
I'm in the garage. Is my pain cave where I normally do my interviews. Nobody's disturbing me, especially my dog when it's like wants to play.
How's training going? How's your form?
For 7 weeks, I couldn't leave home. That was the rule in France. I don't know, it's like middle of March until 11th of May. Training session on the kicker, on the home trainer, before breakfast and after breakfast, then some gym.
We do have a UCI calendar that we can aim towards. First on the agenda, Strade Bianche and Milan San Remo.
The decision that we will not do any more races, that was just before Strade Bianche actually. So I was on the way to Siena actually with the car and maybe 100 kilometers before that. I stayed there for another 1 or 2 days. I did the recon. So it's going to be actually quite nice to restart actually the season at the same place where basically I stopped,
So back to the race then. How much are you looking forward to this race and to riding with your teammates again and racing against them, of course?
If you think about it, that you have opportunity to beat a Tour de France winner, what it means, if you beat the Tour de France winner, you actually can feel like a Tour de France winner. So, yeah.
You've got a few Tour de France winners you can beat on that team.
Yes. Yeah. So, Rowan Dennis, TT World Champ. I won that title, I think it's that easy. It's 40K race. If I do that, if I beat them all, I've got all the titles. So that's easy,
Who's going to be favourite for the day, do you think?
So I'm super scared again about, Rowan's tactics. If he goes from the start for 40Ks and we will lose his wheel, then we are in trouble. I think that the DSs, let's face it, they have to bring a good tactics for our team, and on the end, if I'm gonna lose, I'm just gonna play them.
Brilliant. Well, it sounds like a very sound tactic, Mikael. Best of luck. It should be a great race. Thank you.
Cheers.
Well, 2 men who I'm sure cannot wait to get into the now summer classics, as I guess we're going to have to call them this year, are our commentators for today's race, Matt Stevens and Rob Hatt. Welcome to both of you. Lovely to see you, lads. Rob, to you first of all. We do have a new revised UCI calendar. Are you daring to allow yourself to get excited about that yet?
Hello all, hello everybody watching wherever you're watching around the world. I think quite a few of us have probably been guilty of having amateur imaginary degrees in epidemiology, haven't we, over the last couple of months? But I am hoping, praying, crossing whatever I need to cross, touching wood, whatever I need to do, that we have some racing, because I think a lot of people deserve it, don't they? These riders have been training in the virtual world for months. They've been ripping each other to shreds in these sorts of races. It's time to see them do it out on the road as well.
Yeah, keeping everything crossed that it will be safe to do so very soon indeed. Matt, you are a Zwift expert. What makes today's course so special?
That's a really, really good question, Orla. It's one of my favourite courses on Zwift to ride on. Of course, the fact that I've ridden it in the real world as well means there's kind of there's that link. But I think it's just a really interesting racing proposition. Although I think you're right in saying it favours slightly the classics riders, it also leans in the favour of the rouleurs as well, the climbers. I think there's something for everybody on this course. So it makes it a mouth-watering proposition in terms of being really, really fertile ground for aggressive, exciting racing, which is going to be hard for the riders, but enjoyable for us spectators and commentators.
Absolutely. A wide open race is exactly what we want to see. Rob, Mikael has already mentioned him, Rowan Dennis. He's got to be a top pick for today. Who's your pick, though? Who do you think we should be keeping an eye on?
Well, I think I'm going to go with Michał Kwiatkowski himself. He hasn't won for almost 2 years now. He doesn't often get the opportunity, does he, to ride for his own chances. But Matt talked about aggressive riders, and this being a really good course for him. You know, it's like an Amstel Gold type course, isn't it? There's a lot of climbing, I think just over 800 metres over the 40-odd kilometres we've got today. And he is a perfect man to rip up the race. And you've seen him in his pain cave there. He talked about it, didn't he? He's obviously spent a lot of time there. I think he's a prime candidate to really put everybody else under pressure.
Yeah, I think the former world champion was downplaying his own chances somewhat there. Matt, who do you think today suits then?
Well, looking at kind of current form, although it is a little bit difficult to gauge, and I think based on the last race we had, the INEOS race up the Alpe d'Huez Zwift, I'm going to go for the rider that finished second to Rowan Dennis on the climb there, and that is young Irishman Eddie Dunbar. He's such a versatile rider. There he is, right on cue. Eddie looking pretty comfortable at the moment, but Eddie Dunbar is just a versatile rider. He's climbing better than ever. He's had a very, very good start to the season before, of course, it was curtailed, and he likes all sorts of terrain. And remember, last year was third overall on the Tour of Yorkshire as well, so likes the undulating terrain. And as we know, he's a tenacious, aggressive rider. So I think today's course will suit him well.
You're not going to hear me arguing against the chances of an Irishman, that is for sure. But will local knowledge come in handy today for this virtual Yorkshire route? Well, could well do. So I caught up with local lad and British national champion Ben Zwift to see what he had to say. Before the lockdown, Ben, you were looking in pretty fine form, really, weren't you? A national champion, top 10 at your final race, Kurna Brussels Kurna. Did you feel like you were in good shape for the season ahead?
Yeah, so when we first came into lockdown and races were cancelling and the situation was getting quite bad, I just said with my coach, I was like, look, I can't keep training like I am now with no sort of end date or anything like that. I'm pretty much ready to go for the classics and stuff. I'm just doing the final little touches. So I was actually in really good form. So again, we've had a bit of a calendar set out by the UCI, which has been good for your head and good sort of focus, really. Something to aim towards. If it happens, then brilliant.
How do you feel from a distance the team has managed, and how do you feel that they're going to be prepared for the season if it starts on the 1st of August?
Similar things in the past when, for instance, when I broke my shoulder in Tour of Yorkshire, I had to 3 months out from April and then start again in August. So kind of used to that, and I've had experience of having such big breaks mid-season and coming back in. We've been really lucky to be in the team that we're in and to have the support staff and the structure around it. And it just helps you not stress and not worry about it in one way and just really focus on what we're doing.
This weekend, you know the real roads that will be racing on very well indeed. Home roads for you. How will that translate, do you think, onto Zwift? Does that give you anything of an advantage?
I'm sure some guys will rode it virtually on Zwift in their lockdown anyway. So I think just got to bide your time. It's a little bit different racing on the virtual format to the real thing. But yeah, I mean, my team that we've got there is super strong. So I think we're in for a good one.
So who's your favourite then? Who's your pick for the day?
It's hard to look past Rowan Dennis. It's something that he's almost like tailor-made to. I think he should do the Zwift World Championships.
Ben, thank you for taking the time to chat. Best of luck today.
Cheers, thank you.
So how will Ben get on today? Well, he is in Team 4 with the man many have mentioned already, the Australian World Time Trial Champion, Rowan Dennis. Let's join our commentators then for the race. It's Matt Stevens and Rob Hatch.
Well, thank you very much, Orla. And we're all ready to go. It's the tour of Tuitwell, Harrogate, looking absolutely beautiful in the virtual world. and the e-racing all ready to go. This is what's happened so far, by the way. Just riders in the pen and on their way out into this sort of reverse circuit of what was the World Championship circuit. And we've had a few early riders up the road. Ben Swift in his British Champions jersey, riding in one of 6 teams there. And up the road, chasing some early moves. I can tell you that one of the early moves has come from Rowan Dennis, the winner last time, riding in team number 4. There he is, with one rider doing his very, very level best to get away with him, and that is Jonathan Castroviejo. It looks as though it is the time trialists who've gone out away, and behind, the bunch has settled at around a 45-second gap. It's 4 laps today, 43.4 kilometres in total. 6 kilometres ridden. We're on lap number 1 of 4. Lots of up and downs, lots of twists and turns. And Matt Stevens, who's alongside me in the commentary box. Well, Matt, it is a really, really difficult course this today.
Yeah, it's a very, very tough course indeed. And the power-ups in this game, there's the gamification side of Zwift that we kind of need to talk about briefly. We'll dwell them a little bit more as we go into the race itself. But aero power-ups make you more aerodynamic in game for 15 seconds, as you can see. They're great for sprint finishes. Drafting increases the draft effect by 50% for 30 seconds. If you want a bit of a race, a bit of a rest, should I say, if you're in the wheels. And the breakaway, that makes you basically undraftable for 10 seconds. So really good if you're going on the attack. You don't want anybody to tag onto your back wheel. Lightweight, well, that is one to use on the climbs because it reduces your weight by 9.5 kilos for 15 seconds, thus increasing your power to weight ratio. And my favorite is this one, the invisibility cloak, which makes you invisible. Therefore, none of the other riders can see you for 10 seconds. So we should see those being used in game. But meanwhile, Rob, as you said, this course, very, very difficult indeed, but it's 2 of the finest proponents of the time trial discipline that have already gone on the offensive. Dennis and Castroviejo well in front at the moment.
Yeah, so teams 4 and team 2 represented. Castroviejo just coming to the front of the picture now. He's a Spanish time trialist, and you can see that the gap has increased to 1 minute and 8 seconds right now. They're coming towards the end of the first lap. That'll come up in around 3 or 4 kilometres time. Dennis riding with Castroviejo, and well, just able to relax in each other's wheel, because for anybody watching virtual racing for the first time, Matt, it's pretty important to remind everybody that you can draft just as you would in the real world.
You can indeed, you can draft. It takes a little bit of getting used to, but as you can see, this is a really good example of how you can draft. Both Rowan Dennis and Jonathan Castroviejo are swapping turns on the front. And it is, if you lose the wheel in Zwift, it's actually a little bit harder to get back into the draft than in the real world. But no, they're swapping turns on the front. So every time they go onto the front, it gives the rider just behind them that little bit of an opportunity to rest. And this is very, very interesting what's going on here. These riders are able to ride at or around threshold on this course. And well, they are actually at the moment a very, very potent force, an effective duo out in front. But yeah, sitting on the wheel in Zwift does give you that little bit of a benefit.
Well, we've got a couple of competitions to talk about today, haven't we? This is a scratch race, so first across the line wins. Rowan Dennis, the man who won the first ever INEOS race. For bragging rights, I guess. This is a group of cyclists who normally throughout the year would be racing together as a team. This time they're split up into 6 different teams of either 4 or 5 riders, depending on which team. And of course, they've got their own director sportif. I said 2 different competitions happening. On the left-hand side, you can see rider points there. That means that the first of the King of the Mountains, the first climb on each of the 4 passages, that was won by Rowan Dennis. So he leads the King of the Mountains competition at the moment, with Jonathan Castroviejo in 2nd place. It's the Australian riding in Spain. He's based in northeast Spain, against the Spaniard Jonathan Castroviejo, who's based up in the Basque Country. In the meantime, we can have a look at Chris Froome. There is vital statistics on the bottom left-hand side of your picture. He represents Team 3 today. It's being led by Xavi Sandio, the Basque Sports Director from the car. You'll be able to see that he's putting out the, about 250 watts at the moment. 98, that number is the revs per minute. That's the revolutions, the cadence, the pedal that he's pedaling, and of course heart rate and speed up there. And it looks as though Chris Froome at the minute is just sitting at the back of the bunch and trying to save energy, Matt.
It certainly is, and actually we know Chris has ridden a fair bit on Zwift, and this is actually the best place to be, is either in the middle towards the back of the group, because that's where you get the most drafting effect. The drafting effect essentially in a group like this is like a cone. If you think about a cone and moving outwards towards the back of the group from the front. If you sit within that triangle, as it were, and within the middle of the bunch towards the back, that's where you, although you're moving at the same speed, it requires the least amount of effort. And I can tell you the riders at the front putting a lot more power out. But look at the gap here by Dennis and Castroviejo. An interesting, Rob, since we were chatting, Teo Geoghegan-Hart has tried to jump across the gap, but he's at 1 minute and 13 seconds, just 3 seconds in front of the chasing group, now being led by Chris Froome.
Coming to the end of this first lap, do you think that Teo Geoghegan-Hart then, look at that, with over a minute of a gap, do you think he's missed the moment that he had to close the gap?
Yeah, I think so. It's very, very late for him to go across, but the speed that Dennis and Castroviejo went out of the blocks just shows you that they've really warmed up properly, which I'm sure every single one of these riders has to do, but they went out very, very fast indeed. And they were straight onto that climb, the only categorised climb of the day, 1.2 Ks at 3.8%. But that's where Dennis and Castroviejo opened up that gap. But to cut across that gap on your own with a minute gap against this sort of opposition, well, I think you need to have a few more riders, or hope at least that Dennis and the Spaniard tire out in front.
Well, it's the Tour of Chewitwell. If you know the area, Chewitwell, one of the famous landmarks in Harrogate, Spa Town in Yorkshire in the north of England. Held the UCI Road World Championships last September. It was a little more rainy than what we saw later on, and of course today's weather not too bad out there at the moment.
No, pretty decent weather out there. A lovely sunny day here in this gorgeous part of the world. And a little bit more history about Chewitwell, actually, Rob, if you don't mind me interjecting. Now, the Tour of Chewitwell was back in the 18th and 19th centuries. Harrogate itself, as many people know, made its fortune by drawing people to drink its waters because of their supposedly curative effects. Now, Chewitwell was discovered way back in 1596 and was named after a local word for the peewit or the lorping, which is a bird common to the parkland where the well is located.
Well, you learn something new every day, Matt. Learn something new every day. And I think a few of these riders might need to learn to ride on Zwift as well, because I tell you what, there are a few riders being dropped out the back, a few riders in danger of forming a bit of a gruppetto then.
Yeah, I mean, most of that big group is still at one, as you can see, 1.5 minutes now. Cameron Worth is the last rider in that group, but they're straight out of the blocks. There are a couple of riders who are actually struggling at the back, but I think it is worth mentioning, Rob, as we look at Rowan Dennis and again Castroviejo just pulling back that gap to try and get into the slipstream of the Australian, that several of these riders, more than several in fact, are riding at altitude. So they're at home, either in Colombia or in Andorra, riding at altitude, which makes Rowan Dennis's effort, considering he's in Andorra around 2,000 metres, even more impressive.
Yeah, we've seen a few riders actually being told by their sports directors, because we've had our ear to the ground, haven't we, before today?
We have.
A few little messages of some of the pre-race meetings and things like that, but a few of the sports directors actively telling riders such as Ivan Sosa, who's riding very high up in Colombia, Jonathan Narvaez as well in Ecuador, just telling them to conserve their energy, because later on in the race they might need it. One man who isn't riding at altitude, he's riding just down the road in Sheffield actually. There's the British champion, the Yorkshireman Ben Swift, and getting rid of a power up there, man.
Yeah, getting rid of a little bit of a power up, and even using a power up at this particular stage is probably quite advisable, because there's 2 opportunities on the course to get a power up. They're just going back into the finishing straight now. Once they've used a power up, they'll get another one going under the finishing arch, and another one a couple of kilometres later at the top of the King of the Mountains points. Now these are given to riders randomly, but if you don't use them, you don't get the benefit. So Ben Swift using an aero power up, although he was mid-group, all that will do is just make things just a little bit easier for him. He'll be far more aerodynamic, so he can just back off the pedals, use that as an opportunity to have a mini break before then putting the power on again. So a wise use of a power up there by the British champion.
Well, Ben Swift coming into town there, and you might be able to see a few of the famous landmarks of Harrogate if you're from the area, if you've been there before. In the meantime, Rowan Dennis out there now, just taking a little bit of a gap on Castroviejo, but I think they're still working fairly well together. It's always interesting to see the difference, Matt, between the real life, maybe a little gap between the 2 riders and what's happening out there in the virtual world, because it's a little bit more difficult maybe just to make sure you're right on there in the slipstream, as we see Michał Kwiatkowski both virtually in the group on the left hand side and at home on the right, with pretty professional setup. Look, he's got all of his fueling strategy ready, the gels and the bars and all sorts of things.
He does. I mean, many people who've ridden on Zwift before, or just ridden out in the real world and understand power. The fact that he's just sat there twiddling the pedals, making it look like he's having a bit of a stroll in the park, hovering around between 300 and 400 watts, making it look so easy. It just gives you an idea and a bit of an insight into the level that these professional riders operate at. But interestingly though, Rob, the gap's kind of stabilised. It maximised at 1 minute 31 seconds for our two leaders. It's now hovering, it's kind of settled. I think our two leaders have now got into a bit of a rhythm, but there's lots of opportunities on this course to try and attract and get a little breakaway group to try and get across this gap as we head towards the top of the King of the Mountains for the second time.
Yep, the second climb up out of Harrogate. Just see there that little bit of a 100 metres sign. Remember, 5, 3, 2 and 1 points respectively. It's Dennis who leads that competition. Interesting to see if he's going to be challenged here as they come up to the points. No, it's going to be another 5 points for Rowan Dennis, so he leads the King of the Mountains competition and already, very early on, has a 4-point lead over Jonathan Castroviejo, and Rowan Dennis is there on the right-hand side of your picture, sitting in Girona in northeast Spain.
Indeed, looking good. 30 years of age now, of course, won the title last year. Of course, won in Innsbruck for the very first time, and won the title last year on this course, or parts of this course, so it is an area he knows really well. But it was interesting, Rob, the condition that some of these riders have managed to get from just riding indoors is amazing, because on the Alpe d'Huez race that we both commentated on, Rowan Dennis put out his best ever half-an-hour power, so clearly the benefits of riding indoors are there to be seen, and the gap gone up again now, 1 minute and 35 seconds, but Dennis looking very smooth at the moment, even with that enormous kind of caveman beard he's got.
I was going to say, it's not the most aero, is it? We've seen that he doesn't have it in real life, and you can just see behind, using this bigger gradient here, you just saw the avatar belonging to Jonathan Castroviejo, not pedalling at all, and in that aero tuck. That's something that's also possible in the virtual world, isn't it? You can stop pedalling when you're going downhill.
You can. You need to reach a speed of 60 kilometers an hour, and if you've ridden on Zwift, you know how to use it, the nuances, the gamification side of it, as we look at, of course, Geraint Thomas again looking very good. You can, after 60 k's an hour, you can freewheel, and your avatar, as you said, Rob, will get into that aero tuck, giving you that little bit of an opportunity to recuperate. And I tell you what, Castroviejo is going to need every single opportunity to recuperate if he's going to try and stay on the wheel of Rowan Dennis for much longer, that's for sure.
Well, it's a gap of 1 minute and 43 seconds right now, as Christian Knees, the former German champion, who today is riding for, if we look down our list, where is he? He's riding for Team 5. Team 5, managed by the British sports director Ollie Cookson, as we get a confirmation graphically there of what we talked about when they came across the King of the Mountain points. 2 points there for Knees, and Cameron Wirth, the Australian, he was a big protagonist, wasn't he, going out with Rowan Dennis on the climb up to Alpe d'Huez when we had it back at the end of April now. It seems only yesterday we were racing each other for the first time. And the leaderboard is up on the left-hand side. So it's Dennis with 10 points, Castroviejo with 6, 4 to Christian Knees, and 1 to Ivan Sosa, the Colombian rider, who is riding up there for Team 2 at the moment in this race.
Well, this, Rob, is another one of the really difficult parts of the course. I mean, when I was looking at the course profile, this is essentially a reverse version of the Harrogate World Championships minus one of the small loops. There's hardly a flat bit of road, and the King of the Mountains section arguably isn't the hardest climb on this circuit. It's the climb after the one that the two leaders are on now. It's called Pot Bank, and it rears up to 16%. It's absolutely brutal. So there's not many opportunities at all to rest on this course, as we can just see the chasing group now just starting the bottom of the climb, and the gap now, I said 1 minute and 40 seconds. Big question for me now, Rob, is what is going to happen behind? Are they just going to watch each other for the next couple of laps, or are we going to see some counter-attacks? Because we need to see something if they're going to bring that gap down.
Yeah, they can't afford to just sit in and wait, can they? No. Well, we've just seen, actually, you talked about the amount of climbing here. There's over 200 metres of climbing per lap, which is around, I think it's 818 metres total for the 43.4 kilometres. For those of you watching in old money and thinking in old money, that's almost 3,000 feet over the course of what's going to be essentially an hour of racing. Behind, they have started to put the pace on a little bit. There are a few power-ups used there. You can see the gradient as they race down that hill at around 70 kilometers per hour, suddenly ramp up to around 10%. There's lots of changes in rhythm on this course, and you can see some riders already starting to pay for that. One of them is Cameron Wirth.
Yeah, Cameron Wirth is just Again, just got detached. He needs to get back as soon as he can, because once the gap opens up, because it's harder riding on your own than, of course, sat in the slipstream, you need to close that gap. So look at the stats there. Yeah, just under 500 watts for words, but he's done well. He's closed the gap, opened up another couple, overtaken another couple of riders, and has managed to get himself ensconced just on the back of that group, just as the gradient starts to lessen here. So good little manoeuvre there. I don't think anybody's completely and utterly tailed off, but look at this, Rob. The gap has now gone up to nearly 2 minutes. 1 minute and 51 seconds. Is there any stopping Castroviejo and Dennis at the moment?
Well, we know that some of the riders are talking to their sports directors. They've got vocal communication. They've got all sorts of digital communication going on. Might be text messages flashing up on their phones, on the handlebars and things like that. Some of the sports directors are really going to have to start talking to their riders, and maybe talking to other sports directors, with a couple of the teams having to work together to sacrifice one or two riders, use their own energy, maybe say your finish line at the end of, let's say, lap 3 here, and you've got to sacrifice yourself in order to bring this gap back. Otherwise, if they leave it maybe for a lap longer, this could be over as a contest.
Yeah, I mean, next time through, Rob, we're going to be half distance, and it has really gone very, very quickly indeed. As we look at Filippo Ganna, one of the strongest rouleurs in the world, and of course the new world record holder at the 4,000 metres individual pursuit. And I think he is probably one of the only men on earth that can maybe go under 4 minutes for that particular discipline, but a very, very powerful rider. And of course was the bronze medalist on this course last year in the World Time Trial Championships as well. But you're quite right, Rob, as we look at this steep climb now, they need to get organised, or they need to start attacking.
Interesting development there as well is that Jonathan Castroviejo is just putting a little bit of daylight between himself and Rowan Dennis. We're only talking almost 2 seconds here, but just as that gradient ramped right up to almost 20%, a little bit of a gap was opening up. We watched Luke Rowe, the Welshman, just in the chase, riding for Team 6 today. There he is at home. Oh, and he means business. Jersey off, all ready to go and giving his all. I think he's riding down in South Wales at the moment. But Luke Rowe is there, riding hard, and he's in the middle of this group. But behind that little bit of a gap opening up, I'm sure Dennis will close it, but maybe just showing that Castroviejo, with his power to weight ratio, he's a smaller, lighter guy, might have the advantage on Dennis when it goes uphill.
Yeah, I mean, Castroviejo, a really, really good point there, Rob. Weighs in at only 62 kilograms, which makes it even more impressive that he's a very, very good time trialist. Normally time trialists are slightly heavier riders, but Dennis conceding 10 kilograms. So Dennis 72 kgs there or thereabouts, although in great shape, especially on that steep climb. The lighter you are, especially when it gets to kind of 10, 12%, you know, the pendulum, the physics pendulum, as it were, really swings in favour of the lighter riders. As we get our first real shot there of Castroviejo. Good ventilation out on the patio. Some nice New England style windows and doors there, but looking very, very comfortable indeed, mate.
It's a cloudy day in the Basque Country, isn't it? It's not always sunny in Spain, as you can see. Sunny in Yorkshire today on these virtual roads. Absolutely beautiful out there. -2 is the gradient right now, and interestingly enough, we didn't get a chance to really talk about it too much at the end of the last lap. It's a downhill finish today, so once you've got over all of these climbs, I guess for some riders it might be about hanging on here. For other riders, maybe a chance to go out on the attack, as we'll get a sort of look at just about everybody riding. There's Team 1 with Gouache, Narvaez, Funbala and Basso. And just to illustrate my point, Basso will be one of the riders trying to hang on because he's one of the faster finishers. It could come to a small bunch sprint, this, couldn't it?
It could. I think it would, if it did come down to a sprint. Of course, they've got to get these riders back, but if it did come down to a sprint, Basso very, very fast at the finish, as we well know. And here we go out in front. This is a little bit of a drag upwards. This part of the course is essentially one straight line. It's like a runway, a little bit of a roller coaster, but dead straight before that left-hand turn into the finish. And Castroviejo just being gapped here, half a second off the wheel of Dennis, and he's having to put out 7 watts a kilo to claw back that gap. But Dennis,
well, a perfect illustration, Matt, a perfect illustration of what we were just talking about. Castroviejo on the climbs, having to put out less power to carry the weight of his uphill, but on the descents, on the flats, having to put out more power to try and match the sort of momentum that Dennis can put out.
Yeah, Dennis on these flatter sections, because he's such a powerful rider, his top end will be far more than Castroviejo once he starts to apply the power. And if a little bit of a gap opens up, Castroviejo is going to have to work very, very hard to close it. I can pretty much say there, he went very, very deep there. His heart rate, when his heart rate's dropped a bit, he's beating at about 160 beats a minute, almost matched, in fact, by Rowan Dennis, 168. And they're both travelling around 48, 49 k's an hour, and they're just coming up to a nasty little dig. This is a really hard little kicker with a need to keep the momentum going, and it's also a good opportunity for riders to attack from behind. But since we've been chatting, Rob, look at this. The gap has gone out for the very first time to over 2 minutes now.
It is. Am I right in thinking that this is the final climb on the circuit, Matt?
This is the final climb. It's only about 400 metres long. It flattens before that downhill drag and the left turn to the finish.
You can just see the gradient ramping up 7%, and as Matt rightly illustrated, the group behind has not got control at all of that gap. They've let it go out of control. They've let it grow over 2 minutes, and the alarm bells, with just over 2 laps to go, really have to start ringing now.
Yeah, this is dangerous now. Half distance, 19.3 kilometres to go, as you can see. Underneath these riders' wheel, 24 kilometres to go. So they've still got a couple of k's before they go through the finish to get to the halfway point. But again, a couple of seconds have been taken off there, 1 minute and 58 seconds. So something is happening behind. It's just difficult to ascertain if they're working together as a unit. You can just see Eddie Dunbar there. My favourite for today is a rider that is very, very naturally aggressive, so strong, versatile, and again making it look very, very easy indeed. 327 watts, and well, he's hardly even perspiring.
Eddie Dunbar showing his class in the group there. Nice to get a look where exactly he is in the group. You can just see a few of the other riders ghosted out on that graphic there on the left hand side. At the minute going downhill, that number on the top right hand side of your screen, plus or minus. Plus of course means they're going uphill, that's the gradient, minus downhill. It's ever so slightly false flat downhill at the minute, and you can see it's a bit of acceleration, and Dunbar just drifts towards the back of the group. How difficult is it, Matt, compared to riding on the road outside, this sort of virtual working together to pull a group back? Is it hard to communicate? Is it difficult to stay in the group, to put the pressure on without dropping people behind? What's the difference?
You just need, I think the key to riding on Zwift and getting used to the way you react in a group is to ride as much as you can on Zwift. The more riding you do, the more accustomed you become to it. But once you get settled in the group, I wouldn't say it's easy, because we're rolling along here at around 300 watts. So it's going to be uncomfortable. You just need to concentrate all the time that you don't let a gap open, and you'll find the more you ride in a group, the more you'll actually find particular places where it's harder and easier. So when you drift to the front, you'll find that the resistance just builds up a little bit. So the best place to be, if you don't want to do any work, is towards the back and to the middle of this group. But they need to start working together. They need to start swapping turns on the front, or communicate with each other and try and get a little splinter group going that's going to work and try and shut this gap down. But it hasn't got out any further, back down to 1 minute and 54 seconds. So there's really good momentum here. The big question is, Rob, are they organised?
Well, Michal Gołasz would be a prime candidate to get them organised, wouldn't he? He's one of the big road captains at what was Team Sky, now Team INEOS. Michal Gołasz in his orange jersey at home. I presume he's at home in Poland at the moment. He's one of the most respected riders in the peloton, always having to sacrifice his own chances to help those of his teammates. And he's running for Team 1 here. You'll notice that on the graphic on the left-hand side, each rider has a different colour and a number on their back. The numbers range from 1 to 6, and they are the numbers of the team. As I said at the start, and as we saw on those graphics, between 4 and 5 riders on each team. And Michal Gołasz riding for, we expect his leader to be Dylan van Baarle today, and managed by Servaas Knaven, the former Paris-Roubaix winner. So he knows all about racing the classics, doesn't he? There's a dirty Paris-Roubaix winning bike somewhere, I think, sitting in a shop on display in the Netherlands at the moment to prove that.
Well, there certainly is. But look at this. You can just see by the little groups on the road, there's some attack. Chris Lawless there. Good move by Lawless from team number 4 on that rather fetching purple Dogma F12 Pinarello. There is some activity here. The gap has come.
I think it's André Amador, isn't it?
It's looking at Lawless and Amador. So Lawless is just in the middle of that group, but Amador has just gone off the front as well. And also Pavel Sivakov. So some real activity here. And the gap, Rob, for the first time starting to come down.
Interesting, that little move from Andrea Amador, who was just caught in that little sequence that we saw there. The man from Costa Rica, also riding in Spain, in his summer home at the moment. Chris Lawless, you mentioned, well, he's a Lancastrian who's won the Tour of Yorkshire, so he's already had success over the border. I'm led to believe that he's in the Isle of Man at the moment, riding his bike as well. Not one of those dealing with the problems at riding at altitude.
Certainly at sea level there, isn't he? There he is. There's his stats, just under 300 watts. A cadence of 88. It's kind of what we call optimum. Around 90 is considered what we call an optimum cadence. And riding at or around sub-threshold there, 160 beats a minute, 63 k's now. This is one of the fastest parts of the course. 1 minute and 45 seconds. So, Rob, coming up to half distance, we are seeing a bit more impetus behind, a few more riders willing to attack. But of course, Kwiatkowski and Dunbar, your favourite and my favourite, they won't do anything. All they're going to do is mark moves because they're in the same team, Team 2, the blue team of Jonathan Castillejo. And don't forget as well, Rodriguez, Zwift, Lawless and Rivera from Team 4 don't see any, they won't be doing anything at all apart from shutting down moves. All the activity is going to come from the other teams.
Well, that's the Italian-born, French-schooled, rides for Russia rider Pavel Sivakov. His parents, former professional cyclists who used to ride for Russia, but he's spent most of his life growing up as a Frenchman in the southwest of France. Pavel Sivakov, an international man of the peloton, riding at the front under that Russian flag there. And this is the long descent. So for those of you who watched on the television at the World Championships, they're going the opposite way down what was the final finishing straight. We're just over halfway through the race now, Matt, onto lap 3 of 4. And again, you can just see a few power-ups being used. That was Chris Lawless using the invisible mode.
Yeah, it's trying to go on the attack there. I mean, the invisibility cloak is the one you want to use if you don't want people to see you attack. And of course, we can see him, but in game, the other riders will not see him for 10 seconds, which is a great opportunity to try and, I like to call it a stealth move, as we look at Rodriguez just towards the middle of this group. They've gone past the pump rooms, they're back onto the climb for the third time now, and the gap constantly coming down now. 1 minute and 27 seconds for Lawless, who's in third position just at the front of this group. Another few power-ups being used, but this man here, Lawless, as you said, Rob, loves these Yorkshire roads and has gone on the offensive.
And we just see a few riders out the back there. I think it's starting to take its toll on those who maybe have been forced to sacrifice their own chances to try and bring this back. And that hard bit of work done over the second part of that lap, when we were just starting to worry on the peloton's behalf that it might get out of control, has really paid off, hasn't it? Because 30 seconds have gone off the gap. We'll have a look at Chris Froome, who's chasing on. And maybe he's up in the 4th place at the minute, going for King of the Mountains points here, just behind Pavel Sivakov. Interesting that they're coming back into the game now. So there might have been a moment's panic where everybody had to work, but certainly the group behind is not out the game yet, because the gap's right back down to 1 minute and 22 seconds.
It is, and there's a few riders who are robbing difficulty at the back of that group. We've got Pavel Sivakov, Chris Froome, Eddie Dunbar, Michal Kwiatkowski and Luke Rowe. They are the riders in 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th and 7th, but a few gaps are opening up. There's some fissures now in this group up this nasty little climb. But look at the power there, Rob, of Chris Froome. Over 500 watts up this long drag, splitting this group. And riders really having difficulty staying with the flying multiple Tour de France champion, of course. Sivakov also looking good, the standout rider for me of the team last year.
Sivakov in 3rd place at the moment, 120 behind Rowan Dennis. We're not seeing it right now, but we're getting news that there is a difference up the front. We're getting news that there is daylight between Rowan Dennis and Jonathan Castroviejo. It's almost 10 seconds now, and maybe part of the reason that this gap has been coming down, Matt, is because they've stopped working together at the front. Dennis looks as though he's on his own.
Yeah, Dennis now has 10 seconds. So Rowan Dennis now out on his own. In full TT mode, taking the points again. So 15 points. It looks like he's going to be set fair to at least pull on the polka dot jersey as King of the Mountains winner. But now, this isn't a 2-up now, Rob. This is a solo effort. But this is a man who can do it. But the gap rapidly coming down now with Sivakov, Dunbar and Kwiatkowski and Froome. Also with, looks like Geraint Thomas in the mix as well, trying now to come across the gap.
Yeah, there's a group of around 10 riders behind. Again, maybe just 1 or 2 seconds. Interesting to see if it's going to get back together after they all come over the top of that King of the Mountains climb. For now, Castroviejo looks as though he's lost his mojo, doesn't he? 20 seconds, 21, 22. The gap continues to grow, and Rowan Dennis is the only man left out the front to try and fight for this on his own. He's gone all in so far, Matt. He's only got one choice now, and that's to continue.
Yeah, he's got to. He's completely committed. We saw that straight from the off. You know, pinned his colours to the mast, didn't he? He's now on his own. Castroviejo is almost, with the greatest of respect, got his reversing lights on. He needs to just recuperate. Maybe maybe the gap is going out so much that he's actually just backed off. There's no point in riding in no man's land. If he's going to be of any use to his team, which contains Kwiatkowski Dunbar and Theo Geoghegan Hart, he could come back to a couple of big pulls on the front before going backwards.
Well, interesting you mentioned Dunbar, because I think the fact that Castroviejo started to go backwards has meant that he's become more interested. He's putting in a big dig now. You can see his power numbers light up orange on that graphic. 9, 10 watts per kilo almost there as he got right onto the wheel of Sivakov. They go uphill again, 8, 9%. And Dunbar looks as though he's been given green light to race his own race now.
It certainly is, but Castroviejo now 56 seconds. He really is coming back very, very quickly indeed. Dennis still holding that 6 watts a kilo, but Dunbar and Sivakov looking very, very good here. And it's all the more amazing because Sivakov, one of those riders who's at altitude, 22 years of age, he's in Andorra, but Dunbar looking very, very composed indeed at the moment, hovering just under 500 watts, but again, making it look very, very easy.
Hugely talented rider from Ireland is Eddie Dunbar. He's riding for Team 2 here. And you mentioned the fact that his teammate had just seen his own power diminish. Jonathan Castroviejo is now already almost caught. 1 minute 7 seconds behind. Interesting to see if he can give Dunbar a bit of a turn here, Matt.
Yeah, I think that's what his plan would be. I mean, even if he gives him 1 or 2 big pulls, that should be the plan. Of course, all of these teams will be in communication with each other, either via WhatsApp. Of course, they've got their director sportif, which is for Team 2, the blue team. It is Gabriel Rasch. He'll be communicating with them. I'd imagine he would have said to Castroviejo, okay, your day's done in terms of trying to win this race, but drop back, take a few deep breaths, make sure you're hydrated, and then give a couple of big turns to Eddie Dunbar, who on this course should be one of the favourites, and he's going to have some really willing help here from Pavel Sivakov. This is a really good duo, but look at this. Theo Geoghegan Hart has come into the mix now. He's only 10 seconds or so just behind this pair.
It's interesting as well because he's on the same team as Eddie Dunbar. Interesting to see what happens with all of these riders as well. Supposed to be teammates on the day. They're normally used to being teammates in the whole grand scheme of things all year, but they all want the bragging rights, don't they? They all want to be able to say that they beat their mates next time that they're sitting on the team bus waiting for the start on the real roads to go again. There's just under 16 kilometres to go here. We've got around 1.5 laps remaining. And there is Theo Geoghegan Hart at the moment, sitting in 5th position at 1 minute and 24 back. He's got another 10 seconds to bridge to his teammate Dunbar. If he can get there, and if Castroviejo can put in a turn, well, they're in a superbly strong position, aren't they, Team 2?
Yeah, very, very. I mean, they've played their cards superbly so far. The one flying the ointment at the moment remains to be Rowan Dennis, who's still kicking out some big, big power. Just look at that, 6.6 watts a kilo. He has not missed a beat, still with that very comfortable gap of 1 minute and 12 seconds over Castroviejo, who will be joined very shortly, Rob, by Sivakov and Dunbar. And if Theo Geoghegan Hart can get across that gap, they are in with a chance. If they can really work together and hope that Dennis fades in the last lap, this could be a humdinger of a final lap.
Well, there is Eddie Dunbar, 15.5 kilometres to go, but the road is about to go uphill. You'll watch those numbers in the top right-hand part of your picture turn red. There it is, 20%, and it's a move from Sivakov, who's really put in a big there. They finally reached Castroviejo. Interesting to see what he does, if he can do anything now.
Yeah, it is. It's very, very difficult. I mean, in terms of catching somebody, you want to catch them on the flats you can get on the slipstream. But look at this, Dunbar and Sivakov have gone straight past Castroviejo. Look at the numbers here, 8 watts a kilo, 6 for Castroviejo, who I think his virtual head is now bowed. Sivakov flying up this climb, looking very, very good indeed, and shutting the gap. Another few seconds have been taken out of the lead on this pop bank climb. 10% is the gradient, and it doesn't. We know this climb pretty well ourselves, Rob. We've ridden on here. It doesn't actually flatten out particularly quickly. It just drags on, doesn't it?
Yeah, some of you have ridden faster than others, Matt, that's fair to say. Sivakov up there at the moment in second place. Oh, and I think he's just trying to use a power-up. You could just see him pressing on the keyboard there ahead of us. And look at that pain face.
That's focus, isn't it? Look at that. I tell you what, there's some serious... That hair as well, almost matching my hair state at the moment. But no, he is determined. I think that was a little bit of a power up there. And of course, on Zwift, you can see that what what the other riders are putting out. All the stats are there for you to see, your heart rate, your cadence, and you can see them, the kind of stats as well of your nearest rival, seeing how they're suffering. And of course, riding within the team, they'll know the strengths and weaknesses of the other rider as well. So it's got this other added psychological dimension to the tactics that play out.
Just to update the viewers watching wherever you're watching around the world on what's happened with that Theo Geoghegan Hart move, by the way. He has lifted his foot off the pedal a little and he's back in the bunch behind. He's decided not to try and close that gap because there's now a gap of 35 seconds between the two riders who were just watching, Dunbar and Sivakov, and Geraint Thomas and everybody else back in the peloton behind. In the meantime, the gap to Rowan Dennis up front has been closed to 1 minute and 7 seconds. We were watching Dennis just riding away there. Matt, how do you see things here? Is the big bunch behind still in the mix at just over a minute and a half? Or does Dennis's only challenge come from this duo?
I still think there's a possibility because we could see that big attack earlier on by Chris Froome is clearly feeling good. Geraint Thomas has been very quiet. Ben Swift as well. There's clearly a few riders here for me, Rob, that if they don't leave it too late, as long as they start doing something in the next kind of 5 or 6 Ks, they could bridge across. But if they leave it to kind of 6-7 kilometres to go, deep into that final lap, I think they're going to kind of give it to Rowan Dennis. They need to start doing something now. But I have a feeling there's a few guys like Thomas here and Ben Swift who have kept their powder dry, to use that commentator's cliche, and are now going to ramp things up heading into the final lap.
Well, they'll be hoping you haven't put the commentator's curse on them there, Matt, but that is Team 6 with Geraint Thomas desperately trying to push on. You can just see him on the bottom left-hand side of your screen, pushing out over 300 watts there, pedaling a huge gear because his revs per minute, his cadence, was down at 71 and pedaling at almost 50 kilometers per hour, so really giving it a dig with a very big gear there.
Yeah, he's got to, again, really like a low cadence, high torque, really putting some power through. Very, very smooth indeed. Making it, well, it's not exactly making it look easy. Rocking from side to side there, just showing that this is requiring a fair bit of effort. But they're hovering about 1 minute and 30 seconds. This is now looking pretty dangerous. I think clearly Dunbar and Sivakov have got the bit between their teeth. They are riding very, very well together, but they don't seem to be making too much of an inroad into Rowan Dennis at the moment, who's still managing to hold over 6.5 watts a kilo, just showing why he is the double time trial champion of the world.
Ben Swift riding for Team 4, the British national champion. For those of you who don't usually watch the cycling, that's the reason he has different jersey up there on the picture. Those British stripes, meaning that he can represent his nation as the champion on the road for the year. He'll get a few extra months, won't he, this year, because the British Championships normally coming up would be in the next few weekends, wouldn't it? But at the moment it looks as though it's going to be around at the end of August.
Yeah, indeed, normally at the end of June, just before the Tour de France and the Championships. But Ben Swift there, again, not being too active. Of course, he is on the same team as Rowan Dennis, so perhaps just drifting to the front almost to slow things down, almost like the blocking that we see on the road. So drifts to the front only to back off and ease the momentum of the group behind, playing a bit of a foil for his teammate Rowan Dennis, who is absolutely flying down one of the fast sections of this course. Again, this particular section, Rob, will suit him down to the ground. 72 kilos, holding around 350 watts, equates to nearly 60 k's an hour at the moment. Absolutely flying.
And this is when it comes to the next lap, where we will see the fight to the finish. It is a very, very fast run in, isn't it, on this course? It is the opposite way round to the way everybody rode at the World Championships last year. This big red sign indicates that there will be 1 kilometre to go to the finish line the next time round. So he's 1 lap and 1 kilometre away from the finish. 11.9 Ks in total to go for the Australian. The man who went from the very bottom of Alpe du Zwift when they raced each other this time is looking to make it 2 out of 2, and he now has a convinced chaser behind, and it's Ben Swift who's convinced of his own ability to try and hold everybody off. He's got around 7 seconds on the group behind. Trying to join him in the chase is Chris Froome.
This is a great attack by Ben Swift, knows these roads, of course. He's a Yorkshireman himself. He's actually in his pain cave there with a mirror in, we believe he's in Sheffield, putting over 400 watts, trying to get across this gap. And if he were to join Dunbar and Sivakov, the question for me, Rob, would he work? Now, would he wait or would he try and then jump across to Dennis? That would be very, very interesting. He certainly won't assist Dunbar and Sivakov in chasing, but it will be very interesting if this man on your screen now, Chris Froome, gets across as well. Thomas also in the mix, 4 seconds behind Froome. This is going to be an absolutely scintillating final lap, Rob.
Well, what a show Team INEOS are putting on for us here on the INEOS eRace number 2. It's not often they get a chance to race each other, but the bragging rights are up for grabs, and Chris Froome, the multiple Grand Tour winner, is out ahead chasing on. Geraint Thomas, a Tour de France winner himself, as the group starts to narrow and thin behind. He's put such a big effort in there that he's now in danger of being dropped by those chasing.
Yeah, they went straight past him, but again, he's back on the power again, just leaning on it a little bit out the saddle there, and he'll just get back in contact, back into that slipstream, which will give him that opportunity to rest again. And remember, next time through the finish, these rods will be given another power-up. So these power-ups, as we head into the final lap, especially as we go through the King of the Mountains arch, that will be the last power-up that the riders have to use if we get into a race-winning situation. But here are the 2 chasers, Dunbar and Sivakov, still 1 minute and 12 seconds. So Dennis, Rob, is taking in a nice lead into the final lap.
And Rowan Dennis, the Australian, has just begun the final lap of this second INEOS race. Eddie Dunbar chasing alongside Pavel Sivakov. It's an Aussie out front, an Irishman and a Russian chasing on. And then we have 11 further riders chasing behind Matt. And behind them, it's almost a minute to the rest of the peloton. So it's down to 14 riders, basically, to take this. And it's less than 10 kilometres to go. Can Rowan Dennis hold them off? Well, if anybody can, Matt, surely it's the world time trial champion.
Yeah, and when you look at, we've got Ben Swift on the screen here, looking very, very good indeed. He's left it very, very late. But as you said, Dennis is a master at this sort of effort, that consistent, hard effort. And of course, the distance of this race is the kind of distance of a World Time Trial Championships. Around about 50 minutes to an hour is what he's used to doing. He can ride at his maximum for that amount of time. But one man who wants to try and make a bit of a difference today on home soil is this man on your screen, Ben Swift, just under 500 watts, looking strong.
Do you think that's how Rowan Dennis will have treated this effort today? Just like a time trial, go out from the gun and try and maintain it to the end?
I think, well, that suits the way that he rides, because although it hurts, it means he's in total control, and he knows, probably aside from maybe Chris Froome, that he is one of the only riders that can put out those sorts of numbers on this sort of terrain for that amount of time. And I think that ride on the Alpe d'Huez, when he broke his personal record for riding for power over half an hour, has given him a ridiculous amount of confidence.
Pavel Sivakov just opening up a little bit of a gap there on Eddie Dunbar. Nothing too serious, I don't think, because Dunbar is such a good climber himself. It's the final of the 4 classified climbs we take on the Tour of To It Well today, around the town of Harrogate in the virtual world on Zwift. You're looking at the 2nd and 3rd place riders on your picture. Sivakov representing Team 3, Team 2 represented by Eddie Dunbar, and at the front on the left-hand side of the picture now, representing Team 4, victorious in the World Championship time trial on the real roads of Yorkshire last September. Victorious too when everybody here last met online and rode together, rode against each other in the first of the INEOS races. That was up the Zwift, but at the moment it looks as though no matter the terrain, it's Rowan Dennis who's the strongest. 9 kilometres to go, and he still has 1 minute and 9 seconds of a gap.
He does, but things are just changing a little bit behind. We've still got the duo of Dunbar and Sivakov, but it's closing up, Rob, now. We've got Kwiatkowski, Swift, Dylan van Baarle, Rodriguez, Thomas, Teogegen, Hart and Golesh, all behind. So we've got this cluster of riders that look like they're going to come back together. There's only 14 riders, as you said before, still in the mix. In 14th place on the road at 1 minute 11 is Cameron Worth, and then we've got a big gap of 3 minutes to the rest. So one of these 14 riders out in front is going to win this, but the man who's looking very, very strong, and he's not missed a beat today, is Rowan Dennis. I think the other riders are going to have to find something very, very special, or see the Australian capitulate on those last couple of nasty climbs.
Do you think this is so late in the race that people will have been saving something back, or they've had to chase so hard on the last couple of laps that they might not have anything left? Before I finish that, actually, just taking an updated look at the times, on that last climb, they did clearly take something back. Kwiatkowski and company now at 51 seconds. So they've taken about 15 seconds out on that climb. We know this is the last classified climb, and we know now that Rowan Dennis does at least walk away with the King of the Mountains prize at the end of the day. But we've got at least 3 non-classified climbs, one of them perhaps harder than the one we've just seen. Surely there is terrain left. If they can take 15 seconds on that climb, surely there's terrain left to try and take something back.
I think there is. This last 7.8 kilometres of the course, Rob, to me are the hardest. They just kick back down this descent. They go over Oakbeck Stone Bridge, and they kick up the third from last climb, which is very, very hard, which is about 1 kilometre long. They swing left over the top. Then they go up that pot bank climb, the steepest climb of the day, and then they have the other nasty kicker. So there's plenty of opportunities on the road for Rowan Dennis to kind of fail, but also for the other riders to put in some big efforts as well. And as we can see, a lot has been shut down now. Only 45 seconds to go. Dennis now, for the first time in this race, Rob, I think is on the ropes.
Interesting to see if he's managed to save anything in the locker for that final part. Now he's pedaling with a 45-second gap. His power numbers at the moment not quite as strong as they were earlier in the race, but of course that gradient is ramping up again, 6 and 7% now. Let's have a look at what he looks like in real life. Well, still the same sort of face on, still putting out over 400 watts.
Yeah, it's astonishing, the kind of effort that he's putting out. Again, slightly rocking from side to side, but to me he does look, Rob, like he's a man still in control of this. And again, 40 seconds, still a lot of time to close, but Kwiatkowski now, there's the difference, 6 watts a kilo. There at the foot of that climb, they've just gone round that little chicane over the stone bridge onto the steepest part of this climb, and they're now eating into the lead, and it's a real clutch of classy bike riders indeed. All the puncheurs, Kwiatkowski, the classic specialist, although a climber as well now, Dylan van Baal. This is going to be fascinating. Under 40 seconds.
Yeah, a few splits developing behind. You can see Ben Swift is in the mix there. It is just a group of 5 riders who are chasing now. Kwiatkowski, you mentioned, from Bala, Dunbar, Swift and Sivakov. A gap of around 8 seconds to the next group behind, containing Geraint Thomas, Geoghegan and Gouache. You Chris Froome fans, it's not going to be his day. He's at 1 minute and 7 seconds now, and trailing by around 30 seconds from that next group on the road. So it looks as though, for now, it's Rowan Dennis, 37 seconds in front of Dunbar, Sivakov, Van Baarle, Swift and Kwiatkowski, with a maybe outside chance that Geraint Thomas could get back into it behind.
Indeed, well, Thomas isn't too far away, 43 seconds, but again, he's got about 10 seconds to shot on this man. Dunbar, a big move there, 7 watts a kilo, flying up towards the top of this nasty little drag. They'll then swing left, and then they'll be on a plateau for a while before dropping down and hitting the very nasty climb of Pot Bank. But the gap has come down for the first time to half a minute. Rob, this is doable. Dunbar, Sivakov, Swift, Van Baarle, Kwiatkowski, well, they're in a very good position. It's just, do they work together or do they try and attack?
Just over 37 kilometres covered so far, most of the climbing done and dusted. Around 700 metres of the 800 climbed. There are just 6 kilometres remaining. It's the final of 4 laps around the Tour of Tuitwell in Harrogate, Yorkshire, in the virtual world of Zwift. Rowan Dennis leading by 29 seconds. He's lost around 45 seconds on this half a lap alone. Now, if the same happens on the second half of the lap, he will not be involved in the shake-up at the end. But remember, it's the second half of the lap that you would think that favours him a little more, Matt.
Yeah, definitely. If Rowan Dennis can get over the top of this nasty climb, the steepest climb on the course, and get onto that really fast section, that section I described almost like a runway, he does have a good chance, because there's only one little kicker with about 1,800 metres to go he's got to worry about. But the big thing he needs, that's going to be of concern to him now, is this nasty little climb and the drag afterwards. This is where I think he could lose another 15 or 20 seconds quite easily.
Rowan Dennis, now 30 years of age, the man from South Australia, from Adelaide. And he's riding here on Yorkshire roads with just over 5Ks to go. Another kilometre ticks by since we checked on that gap, and that gap once again has come down a little. It's below 30 seconds now at 28. Kwiatkowski the Pole, Van Baarle the Dutchman, Swift the British champion, Dunbar the Irishman and Sivakov the Russian all chasing. And behind, it's around 10 seconds to that next group now. So the gap has grown between the chasing group and the likes of Geraint Thomas, who we talked about.
Indeed, there's only 11 riders left in the mix Knees, Tergegen, Hart, Rodriguez, Golash, Zwift, Dunbar, Sivakov, Van Baal, Kwiatkowski, and the man in the lead still with a gap now of only 26 seconds. Look at the power now of Kwiatkowski, 10, 11 watts a kilo, really eating into the lead of Rowan Dennis out in front. This is where I think he could lose heaps of time. And Rob, it's happening.
And you can see it on the screen. What a wonderful shot that is. At the top right-hand corner of your screen, that solitary figure of Rowan Dennis. On the left-hand side now, the group of 5 that looks as though it's splitting up as well. We've got a 1-2 second gap. The likes of Dunbar and Van Baarle just starting to lose the wheel. And it's understandable in Dunbar's own case as he just fights to get back on again. Remember, he's been out chasing there for most of this race as well. We're seeing behind. Well, if this comes together, who are we looking at? Because I think you'd have to say that Zwift and Kwiatkowski may be the faster of the riders.
I don't think that's a fair shout. Definitely, we know how quick Zwift is at the end of a hard race. Kwiatkowski as well, all their big victories have come from small groups at the end of races. But you can't rule Sivakov out. But I think once we get over this steep climb, the pendulum's going to swing in the favour of the fast men. But at the moment, the man in 3rd position there in the national champs jersey, he doesn't need to chase. He just needs to find an opportunity to try and attack and get across the gap. But he won't help bring his teammate back. 18 seconds is the lead, Rob. 4.5 Ks to go.
Well, of course, we've got real interesting team tactics playing out, haven't we? Because there are a couple of riders in this group who are in the same team, in the likes of Dunbar and Kwiatkowski. Sivakov is the man who's trying to give everything now to chase this across. But, as you rightly said, Matt, Rowan Dennis and Ben Zwift are teammates here too. Zwift, I'm sure, cannot wait to get the opportunity to sprint for this one, but it will not be him settling it up, because he will not be very popular if he chases down his teammate first.
No, I mean, I think Ben Zwift has definitely got the kind of skill set and the strength to try and jump across the gap, but he doesn't want to risk bringing the gap down and towing all the other riders across. He needs to just be really, really sensible here, conservative, and leave all the other riders to try and bring back Rowan Dennis. 16 seconds. This is the final, well, this is the penultimate turn on the circuit, Rob. From this left-hander here, all we have is the final left-hander with 250 metres to go. We have essentially now 3 kilometres in a straight line with one nasty little kicker.
Well, it almost is like a real classics finale, this, isn't it? Think back to the spring when we should have had all the races in Belgium and Flanders in particular. Those little short rises that come just a kilometre or 2 before the finish. That is exactly what we have here on the roads of virtual Yorkshire. Almost 40 kilometres ridden, and we're coming towards the end of the second Team INEOS eRace. It's been quite a spectacle so far, with Rowan Dennis out there since the start. He had good company for a while, didn't he? But behind Jonathan Castroviejo could not last the distance. Rowan Dennis has done, but he has only 17 seconds now on Kwiatkowski, Dunbar, Sivakov, Van Baarle and Zwift, all very good classics riders. And, well, there's one more rider desperately trying to get across. Carlos Rodriguez is burying himself to reach this next gap. But if he reaches them with 3 kilometres to go, he's still got around 5 seconds to close. Well, he might not have too much left for the finish.
Yeah, Carlos Rodriguez, of course, the youngest rider in this field, only 19 years of age, signed a long-term contract with Team INEOS. But Dennis now has extended his lead by a couple of little seconds. I think the only part of the course now that Dennis is really going to suffer on is this next little drag we've got coming up that comes in around a kilometre's time. These riders will see it up in front. The road literally is arrow straight. They need to do something pretty serious now, but it looks to me as if Dennis could pull this off. But behind, they're putting out more power at the moment.
You could just see it in the distance there in that last shot, Matt. A little bit of a rise coming. Dennis now onto that rise with 2.5 kilometres to go. You have to say, though, the likes of Dunbar chasing on Sivakov, Kwiatkowski, this climb is right up their street, isn't it?
It certainly is, but just look, Rowan Dennis still managing to put out over 500 watts. He is not giving up. He's trying to empty the tank. If he can get over the top of this one, I wouldn't say he's home and dry. He's got to fight, but this is the hardest part of the circuit for him now. With the gap still holding steady, another couple of seconds have taken. Van Baarle, Zwift, Sivakov, all on the attack on this drag now.
And the power numbers light up. The power numbers light up orange and red as they really put big digs in behind. You can see the power-ups there as well being used. The featherweight power-up, I think, being employed by Sivakov. And they've put a gap into the likes of Kwiatkowski and Dunbar. Kwiatkowski not looking at his very best here. He's 3 seconds behind and being outclimbed by the likes of Van Baarle and Zwift. And Van Baarle himself with Sivakov just riding away from the British champion. And the gap's down to under 10 seconds now. Dylan Van Baarle up against Rowan Dennis with Pavel Sivakov. So strong on his wheel. And look at Van Baarle go. Look at Dylan van Baarle go. He's riding Sivakov off his wheel. 2 kilometers to go, but he's 9 seconds to make up on Rowan Dennis.
Can he close the gap? A big effort over the top of the climb, and look at Sivakov trying to claw his way back into contention. And also Ben Swift is there, waiting, lurking, sitting in the wheels of these two riders. Remember, it's his teammate out in front, and for the first time in the whole race, Rob, the gap for Rowan Dennis down into single figures, 8.5 seconds with 1,600 meters to go.
Well, 1.5 kilometers to that finish, and you can see Kwiatkowski and Dunbar. If you look at the times on the right-hand side of your screen, they have gone for the time being. There's not much time to recover either. They have a 10-second deficit now. A Swift in particular is looking very good here. And just quickly, Matt, his tactic, the man in the white champion's jersey here of Great Britain, surely is to just let the other two do the work. And if it comes back together, he's the man to pounce, because otherwise it's his teammate who's going to win the race as he approaches 1 kilometer to go.
Exactly, that's what he needs to do, just sit and wait patiently. If he does drift to the front, just back off and knock the speed back a little bit. Still 9 seconds, 1k to go. As you said, he's just going to wait for the sprint here, but it's all up to Dennis now. Can they close the gap? Is there enough virtual tarmac to shut this down now to the flying Rowan Dennis, resplendent in those rather amazing green socks?
Rowan Dennis on track to do it again. He has 10 seconds of a gap on Pavel Sivakov, his teammate Ben Swift, and the Dutchman Dylan van Baarle all riding on behind. The meters tick away, 600 to go after 42.8 kilometers, and still Rowan Dennis puts out that power. Still he pedals on, still going at over 50 kilometers per hour. Just one left turn to go, and it looks as though nobody's going to get near him.
He's looking absolutely amazing, isn't he? This is the last few hundred meters are going to be glorious for Rowan Dennis. He can just back off the pedals a little bit. He's got enough of a cushion to take this win. Superb stuff.
200 meters to go for Rowan Dennis then. He did it on Alpe de Zwift. He went straight from the bottom. He's gone from the gun here. It's been a 43.4 kilometer time trial, and Rowan Dennis with 100 meters to go. He has his teammate Ben Swift chasing on behind, and it's going to be a 1-2 for the team. Rowan Dennis for Team 4, Ben Swift in second place, the Yorkshireman. Third goes to Dylan van Baarle, but it's 2 out of 2 for the man who only knows how to win it one way. Yet again, on his own, from the start. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Rowan Dennis.
Oh, that was absolutely superb, wasn't it? Brett Lancaster, the director sportif of Team 4, is going to be a very, very happy man. That clearly was the plan, to put Dennis out in front, but great riding by Ben Swift to control what happened behind and get another man for Team 4 on the podium. Wonderful stuff. What a great race.
Well, Rowan Dennis, 3.39 seconds in the end was all he needed over his teammate Ben Swift, the British champion. Dylan van Baarle in third place with Sivakov, Dunbar, Kwiatkowski, Rodriguez, Knees, Gowash and Thomas completing a top 10, separated by 38.9 seconds. Champion on the day, just as it was in April, the Australian star, Rowan Dennis, the world time trial champion. And I think he quite enjoys riding in Yorkshire.
He certainly does. I mean, it's clearly a happy hunting ground for Rowan Dennis. But what an amazing coup that was, to go out early on with the other rider he had with him, Jonathan Castroviejo, but to hold on over that sort of course, especially with the aggression behind ride, so impressive.
Yeah, it was really, really difficult for Rowan Dennis, wasn't it? There was a moment when you saw Castroviejo not able to keep it up, and that was a long time to ride, wasn't it, on his own?
Yeah, it certainly was. I mean, it just shows how good Rowan Dennis is at that individual effort, especially with the pressure behind. But again, he's really, really in the form of his life, Rowan Dennis, dominating these two races. He can do it all, can't he? He can climb mountains, he can time trial, and he can ride on these classic circuits too.
And this is how he did it. This is how he did it. Highlights of the race, a 43.4 kilometre race around the Tour of Tuitwell in Yorkshire. Harrogate, and a very sunny Harrogate, with Rowan Dennis already out front on the first lap with Jonathan Castroviejo. There were a couple of occasions where Castroviejo maybe went a bit too deep on the climbs. He had to hold on, he had to wait, because behind, he also had to really work hard to keep his gap between those chasing on behind as well. Geoghegan Hart was there. Dunbar was very active, wasn't he, on those steep gradients? But Rowan Dennis always managed to hold on. Behind, they fought out amongst themselves. Riders who know each other's qualities so well on the road. Doing it in a different situation here. Many of them confined at home. Some at their summer residences, others on different continents. When it came towards the final few kilometres, there was an option for Dylan van Baarle to try and close the gap. Ben Zwift, who was Rowan Dennis's teammate, did his very best just to hang in there and be ready. Pavel Sivakov watched on behind as Rowan Dennis clossed on his own, and second place went to Ben Zwift. He also took the King of the Mountains competition as well, so completely cleaning up there. Rowan Dennis, 20 points, 9 for Jonathan Castroviejo. Sivakov in third place, with Christian Knees as well taking 4 points. So just as it was on the mountain, today on the Classics course, an Orla, Rowan Dennis with utter domination.
Absolutely, and I believe Rowan Dennis can join us right now, straight from victory once again, making it 2 from 2. Rowan, congratulations. You're rather enjoying racing in lockdown, aren't you? You're making this your own.
Nah, it's not easy, I'll tell you right now. I was hurting from probably lap 2, but I was looking at the time, the gap, and I thought Jonathan was playing the game a bit, so I thought I'd open it up, but he wasn't, and I ended up having to do the rest solo, which absolutely killed me towards the end.
Yeah, I mean, it looked in the last 3K as if maybe you might get caught. How difficult was it holding off that chase?
Yeah, I was hoping that they wouldn't catch me, but obviously, like I saw Swifties also in the team with me. Team 4 obviously 1-2, and even if he did catch me, it was still win for us. So I was keeping an eye on that, and I was pushing and pushing. But if it was someone else, I probably would have found another gear, but I was completely wrecked at the end.
Rowan, I got a sneak peek at your DS tactics, and I believe you were advised to sit tight for the first 2 laps and then maybe give it a go. I guess Jonathan put paid to that, but that was a time trial from start to finish, really, wasn't it?
Oh yeah. Yeah, well, but we had another plan that Swifty would sit back and I'd bring everyone out and try to make it as hard as possible, and it was working that way, and that was sort of our sneaky tactic, that we would keep me as sort of a bullet out front, and if they caught me, and Swifty would be the guy to take the sprint. But yeah, we kept that a little bit quiet. I'll say that much.
Well, Rowan, go and spray some virtual champagne. A worthy winner indeed. Congratulations to Rowan Dennis, the race winner of today's eRace Classic. And that is it. We have to congratulate Rowan, of course. A wonderful race overall. I hope you all enjoyed watching, and we look forward to seeing Team INEOS back soon together in race action on the road very shortly. I hope you stay safe wherever you are in the world. We'll see you again soon.